right, let's look at a table runner for how do I quilt the quilt. This table runner was completed with blocks that were not used in a quilt. Although they're the same star, they're put together slightly. So in looking at how to quilt the quilt, thoughts that I would use would be, do I want to maintain the integrity of any particular design? In this case, the design would be the block. So do I want those blocks to stand out? Whether or not I'm going to use what specific batting I may use. Do I want to keep those blocks to stand out? Which I would in this case. I would want to accentuate those blocks. Also, looking at this particular, do I have prints? Do I have background fabrics? Obviously, you can see here I have both. So it's how can I keep those stars standing out and address both the dark prints and the light fabrics at the same time. Also, I have a smaller border, inner border. So do I want to quilt that? And if I do I want it to be a little fancier with designs, or do I want it to be plain and simple? And then looking at the outer border, again, we have the print. So keeping in mind that most of what you're going to do, using a plain low loft batting, you're not going to see much unless you get a very contrasting thread, or with a wool or a double layer of batting, you're going to see mostly the design shape. And then looking at the cornerstones, do we want to do something that will stand out there? So let's look first at an option for people who want to get it done fast. This is always an option, definitely not my favorite, but all over quilting. And if I wanted to get it done in a hurry for someone that just wanted the table runner and wasn't concerned with all the quilting, this is definitely an option. So this is a hook design that you can make more intense or more open. And that was one thing that I was asked to address, was designs for male quilts that were large and open. This can be used on anything and is fabulous. So that's the first option. Definitely would not be my favorite. Now let's progress into options that would be more difficult. So we have the 3 blocks, and in this case, I'm picking out a very something simple that you could use in each block. The first thing I would do when you're stitching in the blocks is to go ahead, we're talking 12-inch blocks, go ahead and stitch in all of the ditches. So that would be these verticals, the horizontals, and the diagonals both ways, and then you're done. And that will get you a very clean, crisp block and help right away. You have outlined this this star block, and you don't have to do anything in it. And then these are just continuous curves, and you can lay out how you would do that with just a simple teardrop in it. That was done around the perimeter, kept the curve within this block just to accentuate it, but you wouldn't have to, because you do have it stitched in the ditch, so you wouldn't have to. In this case, I'd probably go ahead and throw in a stitched square and a square so that you balance it out with this third one, and I would go ahead and stitch in the ditch around this. Done very simple, but it would be elegant. And in this case, you can choose then, I would go ahead and when you're stitching in the ditch, stitch around that quilt block, and then go ahead and stitch around that inner border. And you can make a choice. In this case, since it's pretty busy in there, you can definitely leave this open, because I think it finished at either 1 inch or 1.5 inches. So that would work. And then you're down to the outer border. And again, we're keeping it simple for those of you who are more towards the beginning or towards the beginning of the more intermediate stage. simple use of the leaf border going all the way around, not doing something different in the cornerstones. And I'm going to be using this in the Jelly Roll Base quilt as well. Let's look at a little bit more complex, and we can move on to feathers. Now what I've done here is given ideas for each block. Here you can even stitch within that star if you want, but you're still pretty much maintaining the integrity. Here's options for background fill if you want on a light background, and in this case we're still using those hooks or swirls, but they're much more intense. And then I've given like I said, other options. Here's the option for other options, and here we even have the squiggles being used. Again, other options. In this case, when we do something like this, I would mark your diagonal line across your block so that you can get these looking somewhat symmetrical. They don't have to be perfect. So there's some options, definitely for even more intermediate. Again, you also have the option on feathers, but I did mention the limitations of that, and always feathers in the corner block should you so desire. I want to show what happens if you do something like a feather wreath in the block, the whole block itself. Here you can see where you lose that whole integrity of the star block, and if you're just wanting to accentuate more the quilting and make it elaborate, that could be attractive. It's what you're trying to accomplish. I most cases wouldn't do that, but I have on one I can think of. Also, just want to show how you can take the circle idea, and again, this is just hand drawn, and work it in these and make it very simplistic, and always keeping in mind other designs you can work within the design. So I actually had drawn at one time something like this diamond or square idea. I had 3. I also went across these other areas, and so thinking outside the box and looking for shapes that you can come up with beyond just what are in the blocks. So how would I actually quilt this quilt? Let me make sure I haven't missed anything. Nope, that's that one. How would I quilt this quilt? I'm going to show you one way, and then I'll show you how I decided against it. So how would I quilt it? I would actually modify what I showed you to begin with. I would do grid work on these. It would be pretty fast and pretty easy, just simply because they're printed and you're not going to see anything. And then go with the continuous curves, and that would be very lovely, putting that little bit of a floral design right in the middle. It won't be seen a lot, but it would just add something to the middle. I would do that on each side, make those 2 blocks the same, and then I would go to town with feathers. I keep in mind my skill level, but this is how I would quilt the quilt. So I would go to town on the feathers in the middle block and show that off, but not within the star shape. So that star shape would really shine, and I would definitely do this with at least 1 layer of wool, would really show those feathers up. If I did that, then I would keep that inner border clean and maybe just a couple of lines. Now originally I had thought about doing the feathers, and then I'm like, no, and I want something that's gonna be less time consuming, because I know that won't show up. So I did look at doing a feather wreath in the border, or in the cornerstone rather, a small feather wreath, but then I would change in this case, and I would do just a small, here's my lines, but I would do similar to that little leaf design, or you could use another version of that hook in this small border, just a little something, and then straight lines in that outer portion, because it's not going to show much. So in this case I would probably use 2 lines 1/4 of an inch apart, and then skip either an inch or inch and a quarter, inch and a half, whichever you like, and do 3 lines, and then skip and do 2 lines and continue throughout. So that would be really clean looking. So again, instead of the feathers, I would go with something in the border and then this small border, and I will do the leaves, I'm pretty sure, and then go with the straight lines on the outer border, but I would do the feathered wreath here. And that's how I would approach quilting the quilt for this table runner. Give me your comments. Would you let me know whether you like the post? And don't forget to check out my blog spot as well, because I am putting photos there that I don't necessarily reference on YouTube or on my Facebook page. Again, that's pennyquilt.blogspot.com. Have a super day.